Okay. First reader, Dorothy, if you could read that. You have to read from the screen. I don't have a list for you.
And this is life eternal, that they may know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent.
Okay, thank you. I think you'd all agree that knowing God is important, right?
Right.
Amen.
And likely you've known him for decades, and I have as well. But I found out in about 2008 that I didn't know him as well as I thought. In fact, I've learned since that much of what I understood was actually wrong. And I'll explain about that. First, I'm going to give just a few points of history with a few dates, just to kind of give a perspective here. We started our own meetings in this group in Greenwood actually in 2003, so over 20 years ago. At first, it was just mostly showing videos and things, but we gradually got into more presentations and it kind of developed from there. In 2008, I started this website, jesusresurrection.info. It was mainly to promote a book, this book, In the Heart of the Earth. It's now grown to over 350 pages, but I've added lots of other material to it. But I've kind of neglected that site recently to get onto another site. But I'll mention I've just started a new publicity campaign to promote this book. It's actually going to have a different cover, different title a little bit, and kind of updated. In 2008, I was given this book, and that was my introduction to the character of God quite a few years ago. And then in 2009, I started sending free copies of Light on the Dark Side of God. I connected with Marilyn Campbell, the author, and we've sent about 300 copies around the world since we started doing that. In 2015, I started this website, characterofgod.org. And I've been concentrating on that ever since. I'm not doing so much on the other one because my focus has been on the character of God. In 2018, aside from Light on the Dark Side of God, I started distributing a number of other books as well, related to the character of God. I'll talk about those each a little bit later. In 2020, we started doing Zoom meetings. So we've got a group going. We did 1 or 2 sessions where we did Zoom with new people. I reached out to people in my email list, and we may do that again someday. Recently, we finished the book of Revelation. We went through that in a number of meetings. And now we're continuing doing our word studies, except this morning we're doing kind of an update of the ministry, kind of a ministry report. So we've been doing these meetings Sabbath mornings most weeks. We miss occasionally. And we've reached people in Canada, the United States, and as far away as Australia, the British Virgin Islands, Kenya, and Portugal. So we've got a pretty good reach there. We're now in 2024. It's going to be a momentous year ahead of us, I think. So we're going to do this ministry update, starting with some details about the website. This is the home page of the website, and it passed 300 pages in 2023. The image you see here of the 2 hands, that's from Michelangelo's artwork on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Is God reaching out to Adam? And I put a question mark in there. God knows Adam, but does Adam really know and understand God? Is kind of the question. I use the same image on my business cards and thumbnails of videos, kind of to give a brand image. So a little bit about the website. This is a graph of the number of unique visitors by month. It peaked at about 9,000. So 9,000 different people coming to the site within 1 month. It's now dropped to about 6,000. Why the drop off? I'm not sure why. There's a number of factors that can be involved in that. It's not a good thing though.
But still, that's 6,000 per month. That's a lot of people still.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, that's not one person visiting 2 times. That's 6,000 different people. So now this is another view from my statistics. This is page views in thousands by month. So you can see for a long time it was around 10 to 15,000, kind of in this range. But in the last few months, it's actually gone up to about 25,000. So that is good. So it's interesting that one is up and the other is down. It's kind of curious, but I think so. While unique visitors is down, page views is up. So that's the number of pages that all these people look at. So that indicates to me that there's more views, more page views per visitor, which indicates more engaged visitors. In other
Yeah.
words, they're spending more time on the site looking at more pages. And that is very good. And I can actually, I have another statistic, I'm not showing it here, but the number of minutes on average spent by visitors, and that's up quite a bit too. So we just want the total number of visitors to go up. That would be ideal. Website searches. This is kind of interesting. So I'm showing just a few terms here. This would be search terms that people type in typically on Google. If they type in repair of the breach, typically the first site that comes up, number one, is my website. Okay, I just want to show you this. So I'll type in repair of the breach meaning. Okay, there it is. So these are the results given back by Google, and the first one is characterofgod.org. Okay, so that's good. But of course, many of the terms people search for, they're not going to see my site right away. So if a person types in a just man for some reason, because that's part of the URL of one of my pages, they'll get my site as the number one
choice.
site or choice returned by Google. If they type in Zechariah 14:12 meaning, it comes up at number 4, which is pretty good. It's still on the first page. There's typically 10 per page. If they type in Exodus 4:11 meaning, it comes up number 11. So it'll be the first one on the second page, which is not quite as good, but I think anything within the top 3 pages is decent. It's kind of interesting that the word meaning might be a good term to include because I think Google kind of likes that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to take you on a little tour of the website, and this will help to kind of familiarize people with how it works. And I think that'll be helpful, especially to new people. So the .org, the idea of that is org stands for organization. It's kind of like bringing together information on the topic, including people who contribute to this message of the character of God. So here's my YouTube channel, and you can see on there, they provide a list. This is on YouTube now of all the videos. They show it by groups. So there's Character of God in Revelation. Playlists is what they call them. And here's glossary word definition videos, verse studies, and some general Bible studies that aren't in another category. And also what they call popular videos. These are some of the ones I made earlier. They've been around for a while. For instance, Who Killed Ananias and Sapphira is quite popular. It's had 3,100 views. What I suggest if you go here is that you go not here, but to the playlists category. And when you go there, it's a lot better organized. So this shows each playlist. For instance, if I click on glossary word definition videos, if I click down to view full playlist, it'll show all the, I think there's 46 videos. So you can see them all with the length of it, the title, and you can click on any one of those to go directly to the video. Many of them are not edited yet. And on my website, I indicate which ones are and which aren't. And also there I indicate which are recommended videos, I call them, just ones that I felt were good recordings, good information, clearly done. So, okay, so let's go on to book distribution. So these are most of the books available from the site. And the number of books sent out since we started doing this is about 1,300. And those are mailed. Vast majority are mailed, and actually to over 77 different countries. And some of them are far away and it's not cheap to mail them, Paul has volunteered in his mailing to US addresses where most of them come from actually. And it just saves cost because it's a lot more expensive to mail from Canada to the US than within the US. Okay, so I'm going to say a little bit about some of the different books here. There's different words involved in forgiveness. It's important to know that God freely forgives, and that truth, that there's different words and that he always forgives us, has actually blessed many people. And I'll say more in detail about the books later, but another book is The Lake of Fire. It's come under different covers and titles even. And the only fire involved is the cleansing fire that burns up the corpses of the lost, the only literal fire. Okay, fire is also used metaphorically as well. One thing in that book, The Lake of Fire, is this table, which is quite interesting. Here's Zechariah 14:12. I'll read that. It's very misunderstood. Okay, people think of it as some kind of neutron bomb that's dissolving flesh or something, and it kind of reads that way. It says, "And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth." Okay, kind of scary sounding. But consume away is the Hebrew word makak, and it really means to pine away. Okay, you pine away as in, total like discouragement or whatever. Okay, and up here you can see a table showing Zechariah 14:12. I've got the flesh, the eyes, and the tongue. But you can relate it to other things in scripture. For instance, Eve in the garden saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and that it was desired to make one wise. In Sodom, they had fullness of bread, abundance of idleness, and pride. Satan's three temptations of Jesus were command that these stones be made bread, which was definitely talking about the senses. He sensed hunger, obviously. All these things will I give thee if thou wilt fall down and worship me, is referring to materialism. And cast thyself down is referring to humanism, the pride. 1 John 2:16 talks about sins that he categorizes as the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. So you can see an interesting connection there, which to me indicates that these terms in Zechariah are not talking about physical dissolving of flesh or anything. Okay, it's quite different than that. Another book, this was first published in 2009. It shows, I believe, from the scriptures, the correct timing of Jesus' resurrection. And it's important as a basis for claims of Sunday sacredness is a Sunday resurrection. It also relates to the character of God as it shows how far God will go in allowing man to exercise his free will. Okay, so far as to allow them to crucify his son. And we'll talk more about that. It's presently undergoing a little bit of a remake and new marketing efforts. And the new title will be In the Heart of the Earth, the Heart of God Revealed. So a bit shorter subtitle there. Then there's this book, Did God Kill Jesus Instead of Killing Us? My friend Kevin Mullins in Maine. And he addresses this penal legal model very, very well in that book. So it's recommended and it's available on my site or from Kevin. I'll say a little bit about the penal substitution that he talks of. Well, yeah, this is a quote from Clifford Goldstein. Most of you know who he is. This just shows the other extreme. I mean, this gives, I believe, the biblical understanding of substitution, of atonement. This is promoted this was in the Adventist Review, and he says, however, to spare us, God poured out his wrath against the violation of his law or sin, not on the violators of his law, sinners, but on the sinless Jesus, the only way that God could be just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. In short, Rather than killing us for violating his law, the Father killed Jesus instead. Or to put it crudely, the Father killed Jesus so that he wouldn't have to kill us. Okay, that's kind of an extreme expression of penal substitution, which I don't believe that at all. And here's a book, The Remedy. It's a New Testament paraphrase by Dr. Timothy Jennings. You can get it from his website. It's also available as an addition to eSword, some Bible software where you can display verses in the Remedy version alongside King James or other versions. This book I think is really important by Adrian Evans, Identity Wars. It's very helpful to show each one of us that we are of value simply because we're children of God. This is a book I just finished reading. I read it, an ebook version, and it's called The Children's Guide to Understanding the Character of God. Very simply written, but it helps children to understand about his character, things like why the flood happened and how it happened. Okay, and that's available from Kevin again. I'm going to talk a bit about translations. This is the booklet, Biblical Forgiveness. The ebook is available in these 13 different languages. So we're fortunate that it's available so widely. It's available in Ekagusi, thanks to Evans in Kenya. And we've had not just this book, but the two books that I have had translated into Ekagusi. We've had almost 3,000 copies of those printed in Kenya and distributed there. Of course, Evans is doing a great job of that. And then we have the same book in Twi, which is a language in Ghana. And we've had 350 books distributed there after Danny translated that into Twi. And of course, Adrian in Australia is responsible, him and his group, for many of these other translations. He has translators working around the world, so that's helped a lot. The book of Lake of Fire and the Second Death is available in, 6 languages. Again, Ekagusi, translated by Evans, and he has others that have been helping him. We also have it actually in Kiswahili, so 2 languages in Kenya and a few other languages. Here's a few pictures. This is Evans here on the right. This is perhaps an elder or someone in his church, and you can see stacks of the books there. They're getting ready to distribute them, it looks like. This is Evans here, and the gray jacket is handing out booklets to these people. I think they had an evangelistic crusade going on at that time. And here's Evans at the right, is obviously speaking to a group of people, and there he is with his wife Jacqueline on the left. And here, Evans sent this to me this morning, so it's brand new. It's he had a note with it that last Sabbath, December 30th, they baptized over 100 people. So these books and obviously other efforts are having an impact in Kenya. So that's wonderful. Here's Danny. This is Danny in the white t-shirt here in Ghana, and people with books that he's distributed. And another picture of people with books. Has a different cover here, but the same book, Biblical Forgiveness. Excuse me. We've also written trifold tracts. This is just a front page of 3 different tracts in a series. Number 1, God is love. Number 2, the law of God. Number 3, God's justice. I would like to add more. That'll happen eventually. And anyone can download those, print them. You just fold them and you can share them. So it's quite easy to do. Okay, now I want to get into talking about some principles that we've kind of concentrated on in this group. And we'll cover a few of the basic ones. First one, in a sense, is rules for Bible study. Okay, if you don't have proper rules for Bible study, you can easily go off track. And we have William Miller to thank for this. So he wrote out a list of, I think, 14 basic principles of Bible study. And these are really necessary to establish correct principles of the Bible. And here's some examples of them. I just paraphrased a few of them. Use all the verses on a topic together. There should be no contradictions when you do that. Okay, if there are, then you've got something wrong. Scripture must explain itself. And that is kind of the basis for the glossary as well, where we allow the Bible itself to define its own terms, basically. And you can determine that through seeing how the Bible uses different words. He also says, if a word makes good sense as used and doesn't go against nature, it is to be understood literally, if not figuratively. Okay, so those are just three quick samples of his list of Bible study principles. The first principle we really want to get into from the Bible is, of course, God is love. I've included the URLs in this presentation, so you can go, for instance, here to the glossary page on love, and you see the definition of it.
Charity doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil.
Okay, I put in charity because that's the word in the previous verse in the King James Version, but of course it's meaning love, okay? In the New American Standard Bible, it says, for seeketh not her own, it says it does not seek its own benefit. And in Young's literal translation, it says does not seek its own things. Okay, so if love does not seek its own benefit, whose benefit is it seeking?
Others.
It would be others, exactly.
That word charity is agape.
It's agape. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, here's next principle is the law of God. Okay, so I'll go to the website again. And I'm just going to read for each definition. We have a definition according to the traditional legal model and according to the biblical healing model. So in the traditional legal model, it says God's laws are the rules he arbitrarily made to govern our behavior, which, if transgressed, incur the imposed legal penalty of death. In the biblical healing model, there's kind of two parts to it. It says God's design laws are the template for life and are based on love, the defining characteristic of God, deviations from which, if not corrected, naturally end in death. It also includes specific laws given as diagnostic tools to show man his condition, okay, whether or not he is in harmony with God's principle of love. Okay, so here's an illustration about the law of God using the traditional legal and the biblical healing models. In the traditional legal model, it says, because God is sovereign and regards himself as the lawgiver, he gave laws for us to obey. Those laws are arbitrary. They are what God felt like including the day he made his list. The laws are imposed upon us as requirements to be obeyed. So in this little figure, I've got a little box here representing God's laws, and they're coming down on the head of this little man. They're imposed upon him. The term that could be used for his role is dictator. God dictated his rules according to his will for his good, okay? In the biblical healing model, because God is love and regards us with other-centered love, he gave laws for our protection. Those laws are natural. They relate to particular risks that man needs protection from. The laws are put around us as a hedge of protection. So in this case, the blue rectangle there represents God's law, and it's around this little man to protect him. The term we would use for his role, for God's role here, is protector. Okay, God knows what we need protection from. Here's another illustration. God's law is meant as a hedge of protection. Sometimes, though, we want to step outside of that law, and we will break it down, disregard it, throw it off, make a hole in it. And that gives Satan access to tempt and harass us through this breach in the wall, we could say. Some will even rebel, reject God's law completely, and step outside of his protection. Then they are entirely unshielded from Satan's attacks. There's no protection around them. However, if they will turn to God in trust, again, he will restore that hedge of protection.
It's the armor of God.
The armor of God, yeah. So this is a verse, Ecclesiastes 10:8. Whoso breaketh a hedge, a serpent shall bite him. You can see how it fits in really well, right? Here's the little guy breaking the hedge of protection, and here's Satan, the serpent, biting him, attacking him. So it fits very well, this illustration with that verse, which I just figured out.
Mine says, whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a serpent.
Okay. So if God's law is imposed, what would that mean about who God is putting first?
Himself.
Himself. And whose benefit would he be seeking if it was imposed?
His own.
His own.
His own, not ours, right? Okay, here's something kind of interesting. What was the first change made to God's law?
By whom? By people?
Okay.
Or by
What was
Satan?
the first change made to God's law in man's understanding? I would say the first change made to God's law was the concept that it was an imposed system of made-up rules with arbitrary punishments. Okay. We will often answer or think of the changes to the Ten Commandments, you know, the Sabbath law, the commandment about worshiping idols. But because in man's understanding, God's law was changed from design law to an arbitrary imposed law, therefore they could make those changes. If it's arbitrary, it can be changed. Okay, another important thing is, does God judge? John 5:22.
Paul.
For the Father judgeth no man, but hath committed all judgment unto the Son.
Okay, and then John 8:15.
Trish.
Ye judge after the flesh, I judge no man.
Okay, so this is the Father in John 5:22 saying that he doesn't judge anyone, but has committed all judgment to the Son. Son, you do the judging. But then he says, I judge no man. Okay, but I think the next verse says, yet if I judge, well, judgment takes different forms.
Mhm.
Here, he does not judge in the sense of him deciding if a person is to be lost or saved. Okay, God does not make a person into a goat or a sheep. He simply acknowledges the reality of what a person is, what their condition is, and that's determined by who?
Us.
The person
By
himself.
us, the person themselves, right? I'm going to click on this link again for judgment definition. And so this is a page you can read on, and actually in the biblical healing model, judgment takes three forms: diagnosis, which is the determination of the state of the heart between persons or between man and God; therapeutic interventions, such as to judge the fatherless, in other words, to meet their needs; or judgment can be a pronouncement of the natural result or outcome of an action. Okay, does God condemn?
Nope.
No.
Just think about
Well,
condemnation.
there is a resurrection of condemnation. So
That's where people are resurrected who are being condemned, who end up
Mhm.
condemned. But does God condemn them is a question. So which comes first, judging or condemning?
judging.
Judging.
Judging would come first. You can't condemn someone without judging them first. So if you don't judge, then you can't condemn, and God doesn't judge. So he doesn't condemn either. Okay, we'll see if this will work now.
I believe in those verses where it says, I judge no one. It also could be translated, condemn no one.
Mhm.
Okay, good. Okay, now I'm just gonna, this is at the bottom of the page, condemnation, the definition for condemnation. I have a little video there. I'm just gonna show a minute of it.
He straightened up.
Where are they? Is there no one left to condemn you?
No one, sir.
Well then, I do not condemn you either. Go. But do not sin again.
Okay, I've shown that a few times before. It's just a good little video. And I've watched it a number of times, and it encourages me that Jesus does not condemn. You know, if you ever, this is another way you might use this glossary. If you ever feel judged or condemned, go to those pages and read the definitions to get it clear in your mind again. And you could even watch that little video and be reminded that he does not condemn. So now we're going to look at, does God punish? Again, we're looking at kind of big principles here. So if I click on the link here, we go to the website to the definition for punishment, and you can read down all about punishment there. The traditional legal model for punishment says pain or some other penalty, including temporal and eternal death, actively imposed by God as just retribution for sins committed. In the biblical healing model, it says God honoring man's free will by allowing the natural consequences of a chosen action to take place. So his punishment is basically to allow the consequences of our actions to occur, essentially his honoring free will. Okay, here's an illustration of consequences going with free will. So here's man in a safe place, is within the hedge or law of God. Here he is breaking out of the hedge, essentially desiring to go after sin. Okay, he's breaking the hedge of the law, so he's going after sin. Now, the question is, when he does that, does God honor his free will? Okay, if the answer is no, then essentially God is closing the breach. He's not honoring free will. He's not allowing man to go outside of the law to do what he wants. In fact, I've got here a little hammer and nails, okay, like boarding up the breach in the wall. So the result is that the person is protected, but controlled and with no free will.
Mhm.
Okay. Does God honor free will? If the answer is yes, then God leaves the breach open. He honors free will, and we then get to experience the consequences, whether those turn out to be consequences we want or not. Okay, so that's kind of an illustration of how free will works and how God honors it. Okay, let's read Psalm 9:16.
Dorothy.
Dorothy, please.
The Lord is known by the judgment which he executeth. The wicked is snared in the work of his own hands. Haggai, Salah.
Yeah, that I'm not sure of the Haggayon, but the Salah is kind of like a pause or think about this. That's kind of what that means.
Mm.
Okay, Proverbs 11:5.
The righteousness of the perfect shall direct his way, but the wicked shall fall by his own wickedness.
Okay, so that's kind of how punishment works. Now we're going to look at some what I'm calling major contributions or unique insights from the studies we've been doing over the years. I think this has been a good contribution. The character of God in the Gospel Glossary. Originally, there was many fewer words. In 2023, in January, I put this together. It was a PDF file of all of the web pages of the studies we had done. So I'm just calling it The Character of God in the Gospel Glossary, second edition. Detailed word studies helping to determine the biblical meaning of dozens of words or terms that have a bearing on correctly understanding both the character of God and the gospel itself. So it's available now in this ebook, 100 terms, 391 pages. And I had a plan to update it this January, but it probably won't happen in January. So here's a page from the glossary website, and these are all links actually of different words that are included. In some cases, for instance, here, murder, it doesn't go to its own page. It goes together with the word kill. Okay, sometimes the words are so closely associated that it's just better to put them together. So it happens for a number of them there. And I put this little line at the bottom to understand the message. So to understand the message, what the Bible is trying to tell us, or character of God, you need to know the meaning of the words. and so many words are misunderstood. Language has changed over the years. There's all sorts of ways it's been changed and messed up, basically. So one word that's quite important, we'll look at in a little more detail from the glossary, is the word wrath. And I put this SWAT up here. That's an acronym for man's sins, that's the S, God in wrath or anger, that's the W, accommodates man's decisions, that's the A, and trouble comes. And usually always from a source other than God. So the sin is what he's reacting to. And that is man's actual sins or his rebellion against God. How God feels about it, it uses the expression wrath or anger, but it's not anger or wrath as we would conceive of it. It's more like it's more like sadness. Michael?
It's weeps. That's
Yes.
what it should have that in there. Weeps.
Yes. Yeah, I might have had it in one place, actually. So his response is to accommodate, because he's respecting free will, and to allow consequences of those actions. And the result, and it's usually negative, is that trouble comes from another source. Okay.
Yep.
Going back here, this is man's sin, basically, going outside of God's law. He allows the consequences to happen. Here's the trouble happening because God has accommodated, in a sense, by leaving that breach open. Okay, so here's a good verse about the word wrath. Who would be reading that?
Oh,
And Moses said, O my Lord, send I pray thee by the hand of him who thou wilt send. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. And he said, Is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well. And also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee. And when he seeth thee, he will be glad in his heart.
Okay, so notice that I have all this color coded. So the green represents the sin. And in this case, the sin here by Moses is to basically reject God's request. Yeah, God says, I will send you to the Egyptians. And he says, no, I don't want to go, send someone else. And the red, we use red for red hot. That's the anger of the Lord was kindled, although we need to understand that correctly. And the blue is God's response, his accommodation. Sometimes it's to leave man to the consequences, to allow man's free will. He says, Is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well. So this is an accommodation. He's saying, okay, Moses, you don't want to do it. I'll get someone else to do it. And it's usually in orange, the consequences. It's not specified in this verse, but the result came later. The bad result came later when Aaron could not stand up to the demands of the Israelites like Moses might have done, and he fashioned a golden calf for them to worship. Had Moses fully accepted the role God had prepared for him, this probably would not have happened. Okay, and I've got a link here to a page about Moses turning God down, basically.
It's interesting that in his wrath, he provided another option.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah. Okay, here's another really good verse, Deuteronomy 31, 17 and 18.
Trisha's turn.
And the Lord said unto Moses, Behold, thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, and this people will rise up, and go a-whoring after the gods of the strangers of the land, whither they go to be among them, and will forsake me, and break my covenant, which I have made with them. Then my anger shall be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them, and I will hide my face from them, and they shall be devoured, and many evils and troubles shall befall them, so that they will say in that day, Are not these evils come upon us because our God is not among us? And I will surely hide my face in that day for all the evils which they shall have wrought, in that they are turned unto other gods.
Okay. Do you find this to be quite an interesting passage? There's something very interesting about that. Anybody see it?
The part you underlined there,
Okay,
that the people realized that their problem was that God was not among them because they had left him.
yeah. So they even understood back then why these things were happening. And we today, with Bibles that document all of those events and all this history, have forgotten it. We blame God for doing these things. Well, he wasn't there to they had stepped out from his law and gone after other gods. So he basically says, okay, I'll honor your free will. You going after those other gods, worshiping them, let them take care of you.
Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, thy God, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. Oh dear.
Okay, so it says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And that was exactly what they were doing here, right?
Right.
They're
Yeah.
going after the Lord gods of other lands. So what he does in that case is to visit the iniquity. And visiting the iniquity is essentially allowing the natural consequences of what they're doing to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, if you go after the gods of the land, you'll get what they dish out. And God is kind as the God of heaven. So
Like father, like son.
yeah. Okay, so it says in Deuteronomy 31:17, many evils and troubles shall befall them. And Exodus 20, verse 5, the equivalent to that basically is visiting the iniquity. In other words, allowing the natural results to happen, which is trouble. Okay. Okay, now let's look at forgiveness. Forgiveness is a two-way transaction. It is both given, that's the Greek word charizomai, and received, the Greek word aphiamai. Okay, they're distinct and different words. Okay, let's read Ephesians 4:32.
And be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you.
Okay, does that sound like they have been forgiven?
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah. But the verse before that is interesting, verse 31.
All.
Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice.
Okay, does it sound like at the point Paul wrote this that they were feeling forgiven?
No?
No, they were still dealing with all those things.
Yeah, how could they be feeling forgiven? They're still totally involved with these things. Okay, here's Ephesians 4:32 with the Greek words put in. Be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving or charizomai one another. So you forgive the one who's offended you, even as God for Christ's sake has forgiven you. Okay, God has forgiven them from his heart. Doesn't mean they've received forgiveness, but he has forgiven them. Now compare that to 1 John 1:9.
If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness.
Okay, does that forgiveness sound like it is conditional?
There's an if there.
Yeah.
So
There's
It
an if,
does sound
yes.
conditional.
Yes.
The,
Yeah.
the if indicates that it's conditional, okay? So in that case, the word forgive is from the Greek word aphiamai, different word from charizomai. One is conditional, one is not. One is forgiveness granted, that's the charizomai, and aphiamai is the forgiveness received. So we have to confess our sins. We have to realize we are sinners and feel repentant about it and recognize that God does forgive, and then we will receive forgiveness. That totally makes sense. Okay, Luke 23:34.
Then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they parted his raiment and cast lots.
Okay, so which forgiveness is that?
It's a Philomai.
Sins.
It's aphiamai, correct. It's the forgiveness received. Was it conditional?
Well,
Yes.
I don't know. Don't know the answer.
Okay, doesn't the Father always forgive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if this is conditional, it's conditional on their acceptance of it. He has already forgiven them. So Jesus wouldn't be saying, Father, forgive them when he's already forgiven them, right? He's asking the Father to somehow influence these people through the things they're seeing, perhaps through the Spirit working on their hearts, to accept forgiveness. Okay, and who is he speaking about? We could say, and I've often thought of this as everyone there, or the Pharisees and those that were involved, the high priest, but it actually says, forgive them, for they know not what they do, and they parted his raiment and cast lots. It's actually talking about soldiers specifically.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know what they were doing.
The ones that crucified.
I mean, they knew you got to drive nails in this guy's hands, but they didn't have anything to do with the
And they're following
condemnation.
orders.
They're just following orders, right? Okay, this goes along with some of the words we've looked at. In fact, most of them. It's a little good illustration, and you might not be able to read this. It's quite small. It says, we can project our own goring horn of wrath, fear, and condemnation on any thought, image, or idea we visualize. This is a real issue when we read scripture and fail to see our own goring horn, as well as those of some of the biblical writers. We don't see things as they are. Instead, we see things as we are, then project them onto others. Okay, can you see what's happening in this illustration here? It's a rhinoceros is painting a picture of this elephant that's posing on the couch, and there's this big horn in the way. And on the wall is all the rhino's previous artwork, and they've all got this big horn in the way. It's just to illustrate that our point of view has a very big effect on what we see.
Yeah.
It's kind of a funny but good.
Yeah.
Okay, now I want to talk about the book In the Heart of the Earth. And let's read Matthew 12:39-40.
But he answered and said unto them, an evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall be no sign given to it, but the sign of the prophet Jonas. For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth.
Okay, there's a lot of confusion over the timing of Jesus' death and resurrection. You see many, many versions of how it all lines up. So this is from the book In the Heart of the Earth, which, like I say, it's undergoing some changes now. And the subtitle will be The Heart of God Revealed instead of the longer title we had before. So again, this involves understanding words. Okay, heart is from the Greek word cardia, which never means the heart as in the pump in your chest that pumps blood around. It never means the middle or center of anything. The Bible uses it as the mind. Okay, a person's mind, their thinking. Also, the word earth can be used to mean the people of the earth, as in Revelation 13, somewhere where it says, all the world wondered after the beast. That is not the planet wandering after the beast, but the people on it. First day of the week is a terrible translation. It shouldn't be first, it should be one of. Day is supplied. Week comes from the word Sabbaton, which means Sabbath. Another issue is this only sign, and we'll talk about that. Okay, let's read this verse.
In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn, toward the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre.
Okay, so this is just one point out of many that I chose to use as an illustration to show there's lots of problems with understanding this timing. And people will read this verse and this first day of the week in there, and they see it as Sunday morning. Anyone see a problem with that verse, the way it reads?
The end of the Sabbath is at sunset, not at dawn.
Yeah, there's a big contradiction there. End of the Sabbath at sunset and dawn at sunrise. That doesn't make sense at all, does it?
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out that the word end here is the Greek word opsi. And okay, here I've got it emphasized in the end of the Sabbath. The only other two uses of opsi So this is going to determine what it means because there's the only two uses of it. First one is Mark 11:19.
Trish,
And when even was come, he went out of the city.
Okay, it's going out to retire for the night because it's getting dark. Mark 13:35.
In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day.
No, the bottom verse, please. Mark 13:35.
Watch ye therefore, for ye know not when the master of the house cometh at even, or at midnight, or at the cock crowing, or in the morning.
Okay, so even is the evening coming before midnight. Okay, so that tells me that end does not mean the finish of, it means the evening of the Sabbath, which is basically after sunset, start of the Sabbath. Okay, so the end of the Sabbath, there's still a contradiction here, but we'll figure that out. But let's read here. Okay, Pilate said unto them, this will help to sort out that passage. Pilate said unto them, ye have a watch, go your way, make it, that is the sepulchre, as sure as ye can. So they went and made the sepulchre sure, sealing the stone, and setting a watch in the end of the Sabbath. Verse 67. As it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. What have I done there?
You separated you added it into another verse, right?
Okay, so normally this is Matthew 28, verse 1. I actually made a mistake here. This should be where it says 65, that's Matthew 27:65.
yeah, it's not-
Matthew 27:66. This in your Bible will say Matthew 28:1. I'm saying it belongs with chapter 27.
Yes,
Sorry.
it does.
Sorry, I'm saying that should be the end.
Oh, I see what you're saying. The first phrase of 28:1 should be at the end of verse 66.
Right, okay, there it is there. Sorry, I did this very quickly and I didn't get a chance to get that right. What I'm saying is they're setting a watch in the end of the Sabbath. That setting a watch in the end of the Sabbath goes with, or the end of the Sabbath goes with setting a watch. That's when they did it, in the evening of the Sabbath. And then the next verse should be, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, they came to the sepulchre. See, I'm putting the separation in a different place there.
Mhm.
Okay,
So
hopefully.
that would effectively lengthen the time from, or shorten the time, from the end of a Sabbath to the start of the first day, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, I think so. What it effectively does is say that they set the watch at
In the
in
evening.
the evening of the Sabbath, not the
Yes.
next day. Okay,
You mean Friday night?
Friday night.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah. Their whole reason, what was their reason for setting the watch?
So the disciples wouldn't steal the body.
Yeah, they're not going to set the watch the next day. The disciples could come in the middle of Friday night and steal his body.
I don't know what you do with verse 62 then.
What does verse 62 say?
On the next day, which followed the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered together to Pilate and saying, Sir, we remember while he was still alive, etc., etc.
Yeah, okay, so what is the next day?
It's the Sabbath.
Sabbath.
Yeah, so the whole talk is about the day of the crucifixion, Friday. On the next day, so after sunset, they go to him and they ask
Okay.
for a watch. So they set the watch in the evening of the Sabbath. All this happened, right up close to the start of the Sabbath. So they set their watch in the end of the Sabbath. End of thought. Now a new, this is a brand new story here, basically, talking about the resurrection morning. And first day of the week is not Sunday, it's one of the Sabbaths between Passover and Pentecost. They would number the weeks as they were told to do.
Right. So it shouldn't say the first day of the week.
No, exactly. Okay, Matthew 12:39.
But he answered and said unto them, an evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall no sign be given to it, but the sign of the prophet Jonas.
Okay. What does the word but indicate in there?
Contrast.
Contrast between what and what?
There shall be no sign given to it.
Except the
Like-
sign of the prophet Jonas.
Except one sign. There's only going to
Mhm.
be one sign given, right?
Mhm.
So no other signs, but only that one sign. How many signs were there that he was the Messiah?
Lots.
Lots of them. There's the virgin birth, the place of his birth, how he treated people, many Old Testament prophecies.
Mhm.
There's lots of them. So when he says no sign but, or only one sign, it can't be a sign that he was the Messiah. It's got to be a sign about something else.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying, if you were to read the book, it's a sign of how far God will go to honor man's free will, basically, so far as to allow them to crucify his son. There's another interesting point, but it was just added to the book about who raised Jesus, and you'll have to go to the book to see that one. Okay, now we're going to move on to something else. Psalm 40 and verse 6.
Paul.
Sacrifice and offering thou didst not desire. Mine ears hast thou opened. Burnt offering and sin offering hast thou not required.
Okay, so did God want the death of all those animals?
Nope.
No.
No, certainly not. But that is exactly how all the pagan gods operated,
Mhm.
right? An appeasement-based system.
Yep.
So did God need that so he could be appeased of his wrath?
Nope.
No. Maybe he specified that sacrifices should happen because we needed them, not because he needed them.
It's accommodation.
Accommodation. He always does things like that to accommodate our needs. And why would that be? Why would he have to accommodate in that way?
Because they were surrounded by nations that did that.
Mhm.
Yes.
Offered offerings.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, he didn't want them copying the pagan rituals and things because he abhorred those. So it can't be just so they could do like the other nations.
That's what
So
they
what about the sacrifice in the garden with Abel and Cain? There were no nations surrounding them then, were there?
No, that's true.
No, this Psalm 40 verse 6 would be referring more to that situation, other nations around them. But I would say in all cases, including the first sacrifice that happened in the garden, it was so that mankind could accept forgiveness, that they could realize they're forgiven. And this is because right from the beginning, this lie was accepted, Satan's lie that God would punish with death and not forgive.
Yep.
So God accommodated by having a death by which mankind could feel that they had been forgiven. Let's read Genesis 4:13.
Trish, I think.
And Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear.
Okay, the marginal reading for that in the King James is mine iniquity is greater than that it may be forgiven. Okay, so he could not believe that he could be forgiven, and many people have not been able to believe that, and thus the sacrifices. So it's a good example of accommodation. Okay, I've got a link here to a web page, God's Accommodation for Man, and this is just a list of some of the ways in which he is accommodated. We talked about Moses turns God down, so God says, okay, I'll send your brother to help you out. The Israelites chose warfare. God never wanted them to fight wars, but they chose it by picking up the weapons of the Egyptians and using them. So God accommodated them by, to some extent, even giving them advice. But he did not want warfare. A really good example is God granting a king for Israel. And actually, that's the next slide here. Who's reading now?
Dorothy.
And the Lord said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee, for they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them, according to all thy works which they have done since the day that I brought them out of Egypt, even unto this day, wherefore they have forsaken me and served other gods. So do they also unto thee. Now therefore hearken unto their voice. Howbeit yet protest solemnly unto them, and show them the manner of the king that shall reign over them.
Okay, is it quite clear from that God did not want them to have a king?
Yep.
Yeah, and yet he allowed it, didn't he? Now let's talk a bit about the cleansing of the sanctuary. Psalm 77:13.
Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary. Who is so great a God as our God?
Okay, hopefully you're all familiar with the structure of the sanctuary. This is just a simple diagram here with the altar of burnt offering, the laver, then there would be a curtain of some sort to go into the holy place, where there is the table of showbread on the north side, the lampstand, and the altar of incense, and then the second veil leading into the most holy place where we have the Ark of the Covenant. It says, Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary. Thy way to what?
To him.
To him. Okay, exactly. And what does Jesus say about himself that includes the word way?
I am the way, the
Yes.
truth, and the life.
He says he is the way. He is the way to the Father. But the sanctuary illustrates how that works. Okay. The first thing we come to in the sanctuary, before we even get into the sanctuary proper, we're just in the courtyard, is the altar of burnt offering. God never desired sacrifices, okay? But he asks man as an accommodation to do this process so that we could even approach him, that we could even think that he's forgiving, even though he abundantly forgives, is ever merciful. So we have the altar of burnt offering, then we have the laver, which of course is a large container of water where they would wash. And if you look at the surface of the water, assuming it's not blowing hard or something, you'll see a very smooth surface. You'll see your reflection in it. And that's where you see your own sinfulness. And it's interesting, it was actually made out of the looking glasses, the mirrors of the women of Israel. So it had that aspect to it as well. And then you would go through the sanctuary and finally into the most holy place. Okay, let's go here. Hebrews 10:16.
Oh,
This is the covenant that I will make with them after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their hearts, and in their minds will I write them.
Okay, so it's going to put his law in their hearts. Now look at what he says in Deuteronomy 10:2.
Trish.
And I will write on the tables the words that were in the first tables, which thou breakest, and thou shalt put them in the ark.
Okay. So he's going to put his law in the ark, and he's going to put his law in what part of us?
Hearts.
Our hearts, our minds. So we could say, I think there's much more that could be said about this, that this represents our mind, our heart. And this whole process in symbol is showing our progression of understanding from believing in a God of appeasement to coming to the point where we totally accept and understand his character and his law, which is a transcript of his character, and it's written in our hearts such that we will not sin against him. Okay. And this is something quite new that we've been looking at, and hopefully we'll develop lots more. You've probably seen this before. We've used this little illustration in quite a few different presentations. So this mess on the floor that these two guys are trying to mop up represents our sinful acts. The sink that's overflowing represents our sinful flesh, our thoughts, our minds. And it says in Mark 7:21, from within, out of the heart, that's this, the sink, proceeds evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, and murders. So the sins, the mess on the floor, comes out of the sink, the heart. There's overflowing because we have this sinful attitude or a sinful understanding, a wrong concept of God's character. When we turn off this spout of lies, basically misunderstandings of God, this will stop happening. We did do a study a few years ago now, I guess, on the cleansing of the sanctuary. It was a 23-part study we did. I put it together in an ebook. It's not edited. It's basically just as we did it, but it's available at this link. Okay, the cleansing of the sanctuary with this little illustration here on the front. Okay, so we're about at the end. I just wanted to thank the team for all they've been doing. The praise really goes to God, but I just want to make it clear that this is not all me, okay? We've got a team doing these things. So thank you, Michael, for editing website pages and screening videos. I was doing a lot of work on that. Thank you to Paul for mailing books, and he's kind of a historical researcher. I send him questions once in a while. What did Josephus say about this or whatever? Thank you very much to Judy, my co-pilot on Zoom calls. And of course, she feeds me and everything else. Thanks to others in our Zoom group who support with your attendance, your contributions of all sorts, your words of encouragement, and patience with me as I fumble through these things. Also, thank you to Alan, who does book printing and distribution in Kenya. He arranges things with the printers, who are very cooperative, by the way. They get things done the same day, next day, and they've received some of our books and are interested in them. Thank you very much to Evans, who's done book translation and distribution far and wide in Kenya. Thank you also to Janet in Kenya, who's done she translated those pamphlets, those brochures or tracts, and she's done some proofing. Thankful to Danny for book translation and distribution in Ghana. Thank you to Kevin in Maine for his support, and I discussed lots of things back and forth with him. And of course, he wrote that Did God Kill Jesus, and also the children's book, and he has a very good website as well. Thank you to Tim Jennings, who shared many insights in God's character, especially on the role of the law. And thank you to Adrian Evans for the insights he shares for arranging further translations of my books. He has many contacts that do translation for him, and for being at the forefront of new insights on the character of God. And also to all of the 600 plus subscribers to the website updates for comments and book requests and the sharing they do, and 200 plus YouTube subscribers for comments and likes and sharing and things. And especially thank you to our amazing God for his leading and for being such an ever merciful, non-violent God of selfless love. He is just amazing.